I'm foggy this morning, so it might be mail it in Wednesday here from your host. You guys are gonna have to carry me
Perfect.
All right. MJ and I have juice. We're ready.
as
Let's
usual.
go.
All right, here we go. Let's have a good podcast. Hello, folks, and welcome to Got Your Back NHL edition. LeBrun, Rishaug, and Johnny, yes, Mystic Mike Johnson, standing by with Pierre LeBrun to break down all things going on right around the quarter pole of the National Hockey League season. As always, Got Your Back NHL editions brought to you by, what, Johnny?
Just saying, I want to jump in there before we get to our quarter pole is actually a quarter of the way left in a horse race. We're actually the three-quarter pole. If we want to get specific and accurate. The quarter pole means there's 20 games left, not 20 games gone, as you were.
Oh, good.
So actually,
we've got that guy
I don't know
on the
if it's
podcast.
still there now.
Awesome.
I don't know if it's still there now, but there used to be in the Canadian Press Style Guide for the National News Agency, there was a line in the style book for newspapers and editors across the country about that, Johnny. Quarter pole not to be used in the first quarter at Sports Reference. Yeah.
I obviously don't read the Canadian Press guidelines. I just let Shoggy know that he's got it backwards. That's all I know.
You know what, guys? This is our last podcast together. You're both fired after today. I can't believe I have those guys on our podcast. Right in the middle of the sponsor read.
Yeah.
As I was saying, Got Your Back NHL edition brought to you by our title sponsors, Kuma Outdoor Gear. They've got a wide range of gear to fit all your outdoor needs, from tents and sleeping bags, travel games, pet products, and drinkware. And they're super fired up about the old switchback heated chair. I have 3 of them, and they're awesome. You can preheat your chair before you go outside because it's run on Bluetooth technology. Super comfortable, super cool. We're kind of the envy of the neighborhood because we're always dragging our Kuma switchback heated chairs around from fire to fire around the neighborhood. Go to KumaOutdoorGear.com to find a retailer near you and check out all they have to offer. Kuma Outdoor Gear, experience luxury outdoors.
So just a quick PS on that great ad read there. Kuma Outdoor Gear.
Okay,
you
good.
You have 3 of them. You have 3 of them, and MJ and I have none of them. Okay, no, I just wanted to journalist here, right? I pay attention to details.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. I believe that you have drinkware.
At the cottage, yep.
Yeah, and maybe Kuma sent me those 3 with intentions of you each getting one. But if you continue to behave the way you have so far today, you're not any closer to getting an Outback, a switchback heated chair.
We're in a timeout now.
Interrupting the host to correct his English in the middle of the intro and the ad read, Johnny. I'm not sure in the pantheon of podcast fouls where that rates, but that's got to be high up there.
There's only one way to find out. Red card, yellow card, no card. I mean, there's only one way.
You know what? We're going to do an impromptu. Yeah. We're going to do an impromptu red card, yellow card. For sure we are. So it's can I say quarter mark of the season? Is that better?
Yep. Yeah, first quarter.
So we're in agreement on that. We'll get to chatting about a couple of things around the National Hockey League. If I were to float this thought to you, Johnny and Pierre, the first quarter of the NHL season has been what?
Unpredictable. I think, and it is every year where the team, you think before the season, you make your projections, and the teams you think are going to do well, they all don't do well. Some teams you think they're going to do poorly, they eventually overachieve. But I think there's such a tight, muddy middle. There's 4 teams at the top. There's 3 teams at the bottom. And then there's 25 teams that are all tightly compressed. And I think that's surprising. There hasn't been separation of the good teams from maybe the not quite as good teams that you thought. And maybe everyone's just a bit closer than we anticipated, Pierre.
Yeah, I would finish that sentence by the first quarter of the season has been chaotic in Canada. I mean, it's, you wonder.
Alliteration.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that Canadian team will never win the cup again. Some of the drama that plays out everywhere here, and some idiot writes a column this week asking other front office people about William Nylander's next contract. There's just all this crazy stuff out there, and you're feeling it, especially in Edmonton and Calgary. couple of weeks ago in Ottawa, and now that's calmed down. The Senators have steadied their season for now. The Leafs have had some chaos, but now they're coming back in a good mood from Sweden. I don't know. It's been crazy north of the border so far.
If that was a competition, that question, Pierre, you won big time. That alliteration, crazy in Canada, that was like headline material.
Actually, it was chaotic in Canada. But thanks for paying attention to what your co-host says.
What did I say? Did I say chaos?
You said crazy. Me. I mean, that's twice now. That's 2 strikes on the accuracy content for Shoggy.
That's why he's not a
in fairness.
That's why he's not a free guy.
What did I say to you two before we pressed record? What did I say, Johnny?
You said, I'm feeling a little bit
you were foggy.
I think the word you said. Yeah. And that you guys should be ready to pay attention.
Exactly. Well, to carry me, I think I said. Pay attention to your host, Johnny. I said, be ready to carry me.
I was trying to be polite. I knew you said carry me, but I was giving you more credit than that. That's all.
No, it's okay. You don't have to protect me today. I love it. Really good interview on today's podcast. Pierre and I had a chance to talk with Vegas Golden Knights, Stanley Cup champion winning head coach Bruce Cassidy. We'll get to that in our next segment. Johnny, you were part of that, but just maybe give us your headline on Bruce Cassidy. What comes to mind when you think about him, where he's at, and what he's done?
He's one of a very small handful of difference-making coaches. Respectfully to all the coaches out there, I loved all my coaches. There's not that many that can quantitatively impact the way a team plays, the points they get, how they do. It's largely based on the roster. Like, you can change coaches. Like, we'll see it in Edmonton. Is a new coach going to make a drastic difference than the old coach? I don't know. But Cassidy is one of just a couple guys. You put him on a team, he changes the way they play, he changes the results that they get, and he's clearly one of the top 3 coaches in the world.
Yeah, it was a great interview. And Pierre, I really liked his comments about sitting back and watching the Boston Bruins last year after he'd been let go, get out to that amazing start. He was really honest about how he felt watching them win all those games.
I wasn't sure if I should go there, Shoggy, and then I was like, what?
You went there.
I think he's comfortable in his own skin that he's going to – and I think the podcast platform allows people to be a little more transparent and comfortable in those questions. Yeah, he basically said he was definitely paying attention to the record regular season of the Boston Bruins, but someone got the last word.
Yeah.
You know what's amazing, though? I love to hear that because players, we don't often admit that either. Like, when I get traded from a team, I don't want that team to win. Like, I do not. Like, I want my friends to do well, but I don't want to be the piece that they let go before they won a Stanley Cup. Like, that is not the way you want to feel. And I think it's a very human reaction. And I love to hear coaches are the same way. I got fired by them. I'm not happy they had the best regular season in the history of the game. And it might not be the worst that they happened to lose in the first round.
Well, it's going to be
I think it's even more personal for coaches. Sorry, Ryan, because players get traded or they don't get re-signed, and that hurts. A coach gets fired. Like that's another level from traded to me. That's like, you're not doing the job. You're out.
That's similar to how you're going to feel when Pierre and I rocket up the charts after you've been let go from this podcast, Johnny. So you're going to have to sit back and watch us.
I made a career
without you.
Out of pumping up my line mates that have them moving to the next line higher. It's okay. Nothing new to me.
Quarter pole means it's 3/4 over.
How come my voice changed? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Can't you just do it in a regular voice? I still corrected you, but you can do it in a regular voice.
You did.
You're winning so far. At least you don't have balloons coming up on your screen or whatever, MJ.
That was weird that day. That was weird that day. All right, let's end the nonsense here. Let's get to breaking some stuff down. Big shocker, guys. We're going to start with the Edmonton Oilers. My goodness. As we hit this mark of the season, you take stock. And I think if you take stock of what's gone on in the league this year, I don't know that there's been a bigger surprise than this. You got 2 GMs that are kind of firmly on the hot seat, right? You got Ken Holland with the situation there. We'll talk about Columbus in a minute. But MJ, is there a fix? Like, and let's look specifically at Ken Holland. He has to do something, doesn't he? You can't, I know he changed the coach, but you have to try and shake something out of this roster too, don't you? Something.
Well, yes. clearly. And I would imagine that Ken Holland, if he is the one calling all the shots there still, and there is that sort of dynamic to what's going on in Edmonton, is tracking down goaltenders. As much as we like the Pickard story, first start in a couple of years, I don't know if he's a long-term answer. Stuart Skinner is struggling a little bit right now. Jack Campbell, although he had a shutout last night, I think, has really, really struggled in the minor, so I don't think you're counting on that. I think the obvious one is to go get a goalie. They're hard to find. They're clearly probably not enough of them to go around the league as it is. Can you get someone? What's that going to cost? That's the obvious answer. Beyond that, though, Shaggy, you look at their roster, and unless it's trading massive amounts of futures, which might not be enough anyways because you need to lose salary to bring in someone of consequence, Pierre, Edmonton's in a really, it's easy to say that you got to go do something. They got to go do something. Okay. One, figuring out what you want to do is one thing, and then being able to pull it off is something else entirely. And both are really, really hard for Edmonton right now. And that's why I don't know if there is the cavalry coming around the corner at any moment, because it's just a tricky environment for the GM to work in.
Yeah, and listen, it's not for a lack of trying. I'm pretty comfortable in sharing that I think there are a couple of trade scenarios that the Oilers went down the track on over the last couple of weeks that for whatever reason didn't come through. But there are conversations being had right now. I heard you, MJ, on Overdrive last night talking about the guy you would go after, for example, is UC Saros. I don't blame you for saying that because he's got another year left on his deal after this year. The Predators are retooling. I put the question directly to Barry Trotz after the GM's meeting last week in Toronto, and he was unequivocal, MJ. He said, we're not trading him. We've told teams that. In fact, Barry Trotz had a conversation recently with both Saros and his agent saying, come July 1st, we're throwing an extension at you. We want to sign you a year out. They believe he's young enough that they can retool the roster around him. And what it actually tells you is they're clearly not in a rebuild in their mind. They're in a quickie little, they want to tweak this around O'Reilly and Saros and obviously Yossi and Forsberg. We can talk another day about, whether that's going to work or not, but those are good players. So for the moment, Saros appears to be off the table. And in fact, last year I was told by another team that the Predators apparently turned down an offer that was the equivalent of asset-wise of 3 first-round picks for Saros. Turned it down. So they clearly value him and don't want to move him. So it's a long way of saying that I for sure the Oilers need a goalie, but again, let's go back to this conversation. Our last 2 Cup champion goalies, and total respect for them, are Aiden Hill and Darcy Kemper. What does that look like when you're sure you fixed your goaltending in today's game? What does that look like?
Yeah,
I feel like we fall in love with a couple of guys, and 2 months later they go off the rails. Like I mean, I'd be the worst GM in the league, clearly, because I honestly struggled identifying what I believe is a sure bet. Except that the Oilers need better goaltending.
Well, I mean, Edmonton's proof positive of that. They took a bet on Campbell. It didn't work. They thought they identified and evaluated a goalie that could help them, and he wasn't a guy. Now, to be fair, I said John Gibson, I said Varlamov, I even said Nedeljkovic to begin with.
Yeah.
Scouring Shoggy for something. But even with the goaltender, Pierre brings up a really salient point. It's hard to know exactly what you're going to get with goaltenders. Shoggy, there are so many parts of the Oilers that are broken that aren't just, we need a new player. The players that are there are good enough to play better than they're playing, and that's the fix that should be top of mind, has to happen right away.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. When I say you need to do something, I understand it's not easy to just go find, a new goalie that's going to be better in net and solve all the problems. But if you look at what's going on with this team, the intensity level, just the overall stress level of this situation, Johnny, can't it do something to just shake things up a little bit, even if it's a bit piece, even if it's nibbling around the edges, even if it's going out and finding a smaller deal to put a different face in the locker room that brings a different element to games and with a different approach? I guess what I'm saying is you change the coach, okay, but if the play continues to be what it is, I don't think you can sit there on your hands and say it's really hard to make trades. There's nothing I can do.
Right.
There have to be deals out there that at least allow you to change something in there.
Right. But I'd only counter with this. They just changed the coach. Talking about a different dynamic to get a spark, they just changed the coach. Like, that's supposed to be that's a lot more significant to the team than changing out a third line winger. Like, it is. And so they haven't got the bump they wanted by changing coaches. And so I guess you're right. You're trying everything at this point. If you're Edmonton, you're not going to be passive. But Pierre, if a new coaching staff doesn't get the desired energetic focus response, I would be hesitant to suggest that changing a depth piece, even though it would shake up the dressing room, would have much of an impact either. I just think they've committed so far down the path with this group that it is this group that is going to have to either figure it out or sink the whole year, in which case, who knows what's going to happen.
Oh my goodness. What an offseason that would be if this doesn't turn around. Maybe. But you mentioned at the top, Shaggy, you said, Ken Hull on the hot seat. Is he? I mean, his deal's up at the end of the year, and I think he's never come out and said this, but I think understood that it was always the plan. They would basically ride off in the sunset after this. I mean, he's been around the game a long time, and I don't think he has any desire to be extended as GM. Maybe there could have been, or there may be an advisor thing attached there, but I don't think there's a hot seat element that way with him. I think for sure it's his pride, as it would be with me, that he wouldn't want the end to be a season from hell, right? I mean, there's a legacy part to this, and leaving the Oilers in good shape where they're a contender and so on. That's probably what would be, the pride of the job and all the cups he's won in Detroit. He wants the Oilers to be left in good shape. That would be the pressure here, not so much, oh boy, am I going to be fired? Ken Holland could care less about that part. That's not even the equation.
MJ, if you were the Oilers, would you have played Connor Brown in that 10th game? Right? That commits them to $3.225 million in bonuses on next year's cap. We had some discussions about, it would have been...
I brought this up.
I don't want to say dirty pool, but it would have been tough, right?
So
I know. What would you have done it?
So people understand because he was injured last year, he got a bonus-laden contract that kicked in on the 10th game. We all assumed it's a de facto salary because the team would do well, he would do well. Of course, he's playing 10 games. The Oilers then pushed that money into next year. That's how it goes with these bonuses. So he was hurt at 9 games. It hasn't gone well for him. It hasn't gone well for the team. And I talked to you guys about this briefly. I'm like, could they? It's such a tough move. Connor McDavid and him are buddies. Jeff Jackson and him have a relationship. And it was all done in good faith that this was basically salary. Now, it wouldn't have been against the rules. It would have been unbelievably cutthroat. Unbelievably. But if you're asking me what's in the best interest of the team going forward, I'm glad he got it over. It's over with. Doesn't matter. It can't happen. He's got his money. It's probably to not play him, Shaggy, and say, I'm sorry, it sucks. It's awful for you. We're going to have to send you to the minors. We can bury the full $1 million. You're never going to get the bonus, and it's going to be a wasted year on a comeback for you. And we're sorry, but given how the year's gone so far, it's a brutal decision we have to make. I don't know, the personal element of it, Shaggy, even for someone as cold-hearted as me, and I am completely cold-hearted, this, it would be hard to pull off. It would be hard to execute that move. And I don't know how that resonates around the league. Edmonton already is not maybe the premier destination in the NHL. If you get that kind of reputation, would you get other players saying, bring me in there? I don't know. Vegas does some tough things. They get a lot of players because they are winning. I don't know, Shaggy, I'm putting you in the GM chair. You know the same. What would you do? What would you do?
Yeah, I don't think you could do it. You'd basically be, the guy played 4 games last year, so now you limit him to 9 games this year, so 13 NHL games over 2 seasons. Yeah, he plays in the American League, but what are you doing to this guy's career in a year where he was trying to get his NHL career back on track? So I think it would have been cutthroat. Yes, it would have saved them some money down the road, but I think that's one of those bad karma plays that'll come back and bite you.
And MJ touched on the part I was going to get to, is that I hear this a lot from GMs. Nothing is in a vacuum. The way you treat a player is not just about that situation, but it's about the perception of your franchise when other free agents are up and are debating between you and another team. They want to know the rep. They're asking their agent, are these people going to treat me well? I know people may roll their eyes at that, but Edmonton's not often top 10 on a free agent list. Let's just be honest. I mean, most Canadian teams aren't.
Have you seen the River Valley?
Well, I personally love Edmonton, but
I'm
just saying.
I'm allowed to joke. I'm from here.
You can't afford. You just can't afford to develop that rep as an organization,
unless you're winning.
Yeah,
like you can develop. Like if you're winning cups and you're right there every year, guys will roll the dice a little bit more willingly than if you're not.
So the Columbus Blue Jackets hire and fire a coach before the puck drops. The team has been absolutely in the tank. The record is an atrocity. The new coach has been benching players left, right, and center, and most recently, healthy scratches Patrik Laine, which, guys, Laine did a little bit of media availability, and I want to ask you, is there something missing from this answer that he gives right here?
It's probably, over my career, probably the most embarrassing thing that's happened to me. So I'm obviously not happy about that, and I think they know that. But it is what it is. It's done, and now we're back. So just try to focus on playing.
Any intention to be better there? It wasn't articulated if there is, Johnny. Like that is a player that's clearly mad and is not sitting there willing to talk about how I need to be better, which talks about his headspace, I guess.
Yeah, and like part of the reason why we like Patrik Laine is he's very candid, and he'll tell you what you think, good or bad or indifferent. He's not going to give you a canned answer. The answer you're supposed to give is really disappointing, really embarrassing. I have to be better. I have to make sure I never am in a position where they can do that again. I got to play better. They'll never think about scratching me again, and I will be. That's what you're supposed to say. What you're actually feeling is exactly what he said. That was embarrassing. He's pissed off. You can hear it in his voice. And nothing to do about it now, so we'll just worry about going forward. Because he's so mad and so embarrassed. He hasn't got, the stages of a scratch. It's like he hasn't got to the point where he's got to make amends and be like, okay, it's on me. Even though, obviously, it's on the player all the time. So that's, you didn't love it, but it's Patrik Laine, and it's human, and I get why he's feeling the way he does.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I would say that it's clearly not a player that's turned the page yet. And whatever level of frustration Laine has towards the organization right now in the moment, I got to be careful how I say this. I will say I would say right back at him from the organization right now. There isn't a single person in that organization that regrets him being benched on Sunday.
Sure.
So
Okay,
hang on.
So then let's take it a step further, Johnny.
Let me put my player hat on.
Yeah,
okay?
Go.
So you're scratching me. I haven't played well. Is there any accountability for what's gone on in the front office in the last 2 years? When do they get healthy scratched? The equivalent of. They've been perfect? They hired a coach they fired before the season started. At some point, there's some accountability there. Does there not have to be? If I'm Patrik Laine, without saying it out loud, this is what I'm thinking. I guess I'm part of the issue. They brought me in. It hasn't worked. But, it's not like they put some wicked team on the ice. It's going great guns, and I'm the only weak spot. Let's be honest here. It's a disaster, and it has been from the summer on, maybe even before that. So if I'm Patrik Laine, Pierre, Shoggy, a little bit more humility coming out of the front office before everyone's happy I'm getting scratched, because you deserve to be scratched as well.
Well, and I think I've said this before after the Babcock fiasco. I mean, management, Jarmo Kekalainen and others there, I mean, they were already under, this is his 12th year as GM, and there's a self-awareness there that from ownership that this was supposed to be a year where they showed a lot of growth, or else. I mean, I think that was already a pretense to this season for Columbus. So to answer your question, I guess if things don't turn around, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I mean, I think we know what's going to happen.
I know exactly what you're saying, Johnny. And I understand that a player might think that way, but I mean, there's a certain amount of looking too far past his own play it's a mistake, right? The guy's not playing well enough. And there's a reason why all of this is happening. And I completely agree with you. It's been a train wreck, man. It has been a train wreck. But if he really is thinking that way, that's a big problem, wouldn't you say?
Well,
Sure.
and you can't have this conversation without Johnny Gaudreau benched twice in two different third periods so far this season.
Yeah.
Right now, that's a disaster of a July 1st signing from a couple of years ago. Like we have to say it out loud. I mean that is not working out right now for him. It's not working out for the organization. That could certainly change. He's a special player with a lot of talent. But right now, if you combine the way the Johnny Gaudreau thing has worked out with what's happening with Laine, those are your two highest paid players.
Yeah, it's not worked. But okay. So yes, I just say there's plenty of blame to go around. It should not all be Patrick Laine's the sole issue of our problems. And I guess Patrick Laine would be feeling when I'm the scratch, right. Everyone's pointing at me. And I'll only add one other point that is sort of in the players' corner here. They're playing him at center a lot. He's like, are you putting him in the best spot to succeed? Like, I know you need centerman. He's a good player. You play where you're told to play. But he's been a winger, an elite scoring winger for his career when he's good. Like, is he really being asked to do, be put in the best spot to be successful? Also part of the conversation there.
Yeah, 100% not. I mean, 100% not. When you've got a guy who's scrambling to find his own game, with the pressure that he has and the contract that he has, you want to put him in the best possible position to feel okay about himself. Trying to ram him into a position that he's not used to playing while finding his game, while the pressure's on. I completely agree with that. That's more than fair. When a guy's trying to dig himself out, make him comfortable, Pierre. And I get it. Yeah. Like, they don't have the depth that they need at that position, but that is on the guys upstairs. That's not Patrick Laine's fault, but it's become his problem. And they are not alleviating him of that problem while his world is crumbling down.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I'd say is that, not that I think he could fix all this now, but a guy that played there a long time that was a tremendous leader and just made people feel good about themselves and made the room work was Nick Foligno. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a really important leader for that organization, and now he's a mentor to Connor Bedard in Chicago. But I always think about those things when, what's that room like right now when all of this is happening?
All right, we got to go quick hitter style for the rest of our podcast. For the rest of our podcast elements, we got to go quick hitters, guys, because once again, the Oilers were the black hole of the podcast content and gobbled up a whole pile of our time. It's been like every podcast so far this year. There is some kind of matchup tonight in the National Hockey League. You got Quinn Hughes and the Vancouver Canucks and Hughes-Makar and the Colorado Avalanche. Potential for there to be a couple 100-point defensemen in the National Hockey League, which would be phenomenal. What do you think? Who comes out with the most points tonight between those two blue liners, Johnny? Who's your money on? Mystic one?
I think Hughes-Makar is riding 3 consecutive 3-point games. So I'm going with Hughes-Makar. Quinn Hughes has been incredible. Yeah. But I'm going with Hughes-Makar, Pierre.
I'm going to go Quinn Hughes because this is like more of a football script that I'm going to try and go after here. It is Thanksgiving week after all. And I think I see the Canucks trailing in this game and needing to create offense and therefore having to have Quinn Hughes out there the entire time forcing things and generating offense in a game where the Canucks try to come back. And so I'm going to give Quinn Hughes the offensive advantage.
Would be the first time the two defensemen hit triple digits in the same season if it actually happens. It's been tons of fun. Watching Quinn Hughes, what a step he's taken, man. My goodness. Yeah. As we tape this podcast, I think leading the NHL in scoring, which is just phenomenal. 6.4 goals per game in the league this year. On par with last season, which ended as the highest scoring campaign in 29 years. Only 2 other seasons in the past 30 years have had a goals per game average of 6.4 or higher. Johnny, what's with all the offense, man?
Well, I mean, I think it's the skills coaches, the advent of the better sticks. I think it is the bottom 6 being able to play and score and not just be physical and checkers. And I think there's as you know all too well in Edmonton, a lack of goaltending depth around the league.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. It's funny. I go back to when Drew Doughty was on the podcast here last month, Ryan, and some of the things that Doughty talked about today's game and having to modernize himself and adjust himself to today's game and some of the things that he's trying to bring more offense into his game. And I don't know that Drew Doughty's in love with everything he sees in today's game, but he also understands that it's undeniable and that you have to keep up with the Joneses. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think last year on average was the highest scoring goals per game in the league in 30 years or something. So this is where the game is at for all the reasons MJ outlined, and it's here to stay. Like the days of the fourth line grind line and the days of just sending out players over the boards to just defend are over. Like, this is about having a lot of players with offensive instinct everywhere throughout your lineup. And yes, you want your players to be two-way players and be smart and understand what the score says on the shot clock, all that. But the reality is everyone is meant to skate. Everyone is meant to force turnovers, and that's the way the game is.
Darren Dreger reporting on Insider Trading Tuesday. Patrick Kane. Final stages of determining where he will sign. 8 clubs, kind of in and around that mix. I'm going to turn you into Patrick Kane right now, Mike Johnson. You are Patrick Kane. Where should he go? Where should you go? Where are you going? What's the right spot for him to pick? Because he's got a decision to make here.
So I guess my first instinct would be New York again. I don't know how well it went last year, but if he's healthier, Panarin there, Big Apple, East Coast travel, really, really good team, treats you unbelievably well. That would be my first kind of inclination. I think I'm leaning as Patrick Kane, East Coast, a little bit softer on the body, traveling, all the rest of it. There, or maybe down in sunny FLA. Could you go to Florida, find a spot there, round out a pretty good team that's playing pretty well? One of those teams stands out to me, Pierre.
Yeah, and Pat Brisson, the agent for Patrick Kane, has been really tight-lipped about teams, but I will say this. I think that my sense is that the Florida Panthers pitch has basically been, would you like to play with Alexander Barkov? Sure. And go to the rink in flip-flops and have basically almost no one bother you every day? I mean, I don't know. And by the way, an important part of the pitch is that Ekblad and Montour are finally back. The Florida Panthers, as we tape this, are 12-5-1 and battling Boston for first place in the Atlantic Division. They survived their injuries to their top 4D. I don't know. What would you do if you were Patrick Kane?
Yep. They play hard too. Like they they come at you hard. I watched they played the Oilers the other night, and man, they're playing a style of play that just, it feels like it's going to hold up. And when the playoffs start, if they're still playing that way, boy, do they look good. Willie Nylander. So, Mike, you set the AAV at about 9.7 million at the start of the season. I think I asked you that question right before the season had started. So you had it at 9.7 then. Where are we at now? What's the number looking like now?
So it's more. I think 9.7 was a pretty good guesstimate back then. I think so. It's more, but I don't think it's $2 million more, Shoggy. And I think this is the conversation around Willie. He's been incredible, one of the best players in the league, but it's been 17 games. It's not been 17 months. He's had 40 goals once. He's never had 90 points. Yes, good in the playoffs. Yes, an incredible player. Yes, we love him. He's not a $12.5 million player. He hasn't played at that level. Right. Now, if he did what he's doing this year for multiple years in a row, okay, then he's that player. So now I give him, like, I don't know, a $400,000 bump. He's 10-1. Like, I'm not giving him 11.5. He's into the 10s, but not much. That's how I handicap it, Pierre. What do you got?
Well, I think the problem with this discussion, and obviously I've been in the middle of it this week, but are you asking what you think he should get, period, or what he should get in the Leafs uniform? Those are
what's he worth?
Not quite the same thing, I think. Like, obviously,
give me both, P.
Yeah, well, I think on the open market, he gets $11 million a year, but I think if he wants to stay a Leaf, I don't know that he can get more than 10. Like, it has to make sense. The Leafs in a year have to extend Mitch Marner. They've got other holes. They need to upgrade their blue line. So is this about winning a championship or just maxing out your value? And I think all these things are relevant in this conversation. But he wants to be a Leaf. I think he's genuine when he has said that. I don't think it's for the cameras. He's not like that. That's not in his DNA, it seems like. So if you want to be a Leaf and you also want to get paid in a way that is commensurate with where you now are in terms of your stature, 10 feels enough to me. And I know that there are other people who feel that it should be north of that, but not if you want to be a Leaf, in my mind.
Problem with that conversation is he's got teammates that make more than that. And that's a bit of an issue. It's hard to say would take 10 be happy when you got teammates making more than he does. And it's a bit of internal comparison, not just around the league, makes it a harder contract to figure out, Shoggy.
All right, that was the breakdown brought to you by our good friends over at Kuma Outdoor Gear. MJ, great job today. We're going to let you go because we have to get to our interview with Vegas head coach Bruce Cassidy. And what interests me about Cassidy's career is that he had to climb the ladder to becoming an NHL coach not once, but twice. Started in the East Coast League, moved up to the IHL after a couple of seasons. Then that team folded on him, went back to the East Coast League, then to Grand Rapids of the American Hockey League, and then at a pretty young age got his shot as an NHL coach with the Washington Capitals. In his second season, that comes to an end, gets fired 25 games into the year. So, time to regroup, ends up an assistant coach in Chicago, then didn't have his contract renewed after a couple of seasons. Now it's all the way back to the Ontario Hockey League with the Kingston Frontenacs, 06 to 08, and was let go after a couple of seasons there. Then catches a real nice break, ends up with Providence in the American Hockey League as an assistant. After 3 years, moves to the head coaching position, grinds his way up to the Boston Bruins, back in the National Hockey League again. Of course, then on to the Vegas Golden Knights, and now a Stanley Cup champion. He's climbed the ladder multiple times. Here is Vegas Golden Knights head coach Bruce Cassidy. Bruce, Pierre and I were just chatting about your head coaching journey, and unique in that you climbed the mountain to the National Hockey League, not just once, but you ended up having to do it twice. And there were some bad breaks in there with franchises folding, and there was, some steps backwards, some steps forward. I just wonder, when you reflect back on that journey that you made a couple of times, where the low points were, and maybe what you would have told that guy as Bruce Cassidy, the Stanley Cup champion head coach now years later.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the second time through was a much bigger mountain. The first one, things happened really quick. I thought doing a good job in the American League. All of a sudden I'm interviewing in Washington and have the head job at a real young age. So I don't think I really understood the magnitude of being an NHL head coach at that age. And, sure enough, I thought our first year went pretty well, to be honest with you. Second year did not. And, you figure, well, okay, well, I'll go back to work, get another chance somewhere down the road to learn from your mistakes, etc. But it took a while. Then there was a lot going on from there. So, but you know what? I ended up hooking up with the Boston Bruins organization, go down to Providence in the American League, where I'd done some of my best work. And I think that's when I said, okay, get back to work and do your job, and maybe another opportunity will come. So that's where it started clicking, as I got years accumulated in Providence, thought, well, maybe I'd have a chance again. You never know in this business, and it worked out in Boston, and here I am now in Vegas.
What do you think your biggest evolution as a head coach has been, like personally? Compare the guy that's behind the bench now to the guy that started behind the bench.
Well, there's a little more patience. I think that's, part of becoming a parent as well, right? You get used to, dealing with some of those things, and how to deliver your message is always an ongoing thing. I think that changes from last year to this year, from 2 years ago. Those are some of the things that I think you have to evolve with. And then your way of thinking with younger players, how can they best learn? Is it visual, audio, both, individual, team? So there's a lot of that goes into it. And I think it's different than when I started. Players are just different. The NHL lifestyle is different. There's just a lot of differences from then with how the players to react to certain things. And rightfully so, the game's evolving and coaches have to evolve too. And I feel I have.
The other thing too, in this story in Vegas for you, Bruce, is that you were out of work for about 47 seconds, I think, between Boston and Vegas. The turnaround was unreal, which you don't see every day. What was that like for you? I mean, you go from a tough moment, obviously, Boston, and then bang, there you go.
Yeah, you're consoling your kids. You got to give them the news. And honestly, if like that same night, the phone rang. I have a guy that represents me now. Called me and said, listen, there's some teams inquiring. So you don't have a lot of time to feel sorry for yourself. You're sort of preparing for the next phase of your life. So now you're talking to your family about, well, okay, this could happen, and you're going through the interview process, and you don't really mourn the loss of that job because, like I said, you're looking forward to the next one. And then you get your next job, happen to be Vegas, and it's worked out fantastically. It's a really good fit for me and my family. But there was some mourning after that, right, in the summer when you're packing up. And I think it's tough on families. You know, like when players get traded or coaches get fired, there's a behind the scenes thing that that you really go through that you have to go through to appreciate. And we went through it, and we came out the other side better. And my kids are grade 8 and 9 now, so I think they'll be better for it later in life, having to move across the country and find some new experiences. So, but at the time it was tough. But like I said, all worked out in the end. Great time in Boston. Nothing but good things to say about my time there. But it was on to the next challenge, and here we are.
Well, and it's normal too when you move on to another gig that you kind of corner of your eye keep an eye on what's still going on over there. I thought last year was so fascinating from your perspective. I'm sure that the Bruins have this historical regular season, but you win the cup. I think we all know which one matters more. But you know,
I know what side I want to be on in that one.
Right, exactly. But what was that like? I mean, obviously you still have friends in Boston, and they're doing what they're doing.
Well, it was stressful, because you're thinking, I had a strong attachment. I was 15 years in their organization, so it wasn't just Boston, it was Providence as well, and coached a lot of those kids as young guys. And so you're attached to them, not only in your professional life, but your personal life. I've watched them become husbands and parents. My wife was close to some of the spouses over time. And so you're rooting for them in one sense because you like them and they're all great people, but you're kind of like, well, if they have too much success, it's not going to look good on me either, right? So it's like I didn't get the job done. There's always any coach in the league, I think, has to go through a little bit of that, right? Like, and I think it's just human nature. If you have feelings, you're going to be keeping an eye on it. So that's why it's almost like we were trying to keep up with. We were going neck and neck all year. Obviously, they're ahead of us, but we were the top team in the West. And then you have so many people, Pierre, calling me like, oh, we'll see you in June at the TD Garden. Can't wait, because we still have a summer house in Cape Cod. So I got lots of friends back there. And, it didn't happen that way. But, you're almost thinking, well, maybe it will. That would be a hell of a story. But at the end of the day, Boston ran into a tough Florida team, and it didn't happen.
It's not very often that a Stanley Cup champion would come back with arguably a chip on their shoulder. I mean, you're kind of at the top of the heap, yet it almost seems like your team started this season with a bit of a chip on its shoulder. And I'm not sure, the prognosticators out there, I don't know if you guys felt overlooked, how much attention your group paid to it, but the way you started this year, Bruce, did you sense that from your group that you were the Stanley Cup champions, not really universally picked to necessarily to repeat? Did that resonate with your team, you think?
Well, I think it does. We have a veteran group, so they know what's at stake, but they also pay attention. And I think you summed it up, a little chip on our shoulder. I don't think teams really picked us last year, even though we won our division, we won the conference. We're a pretty good hockey team, pretty consistent, played through adversity, different injuries, goalies. And then again, you come back this year, you're returning basically the same roster with the exception of one player. And I don't think anybody's picked us, but that's okay. Internally, we know what we have, but that's a bit of the Vegas mentality from day one, right? Don't forget, there's a misfit mentality here from how they became a hockey club. They had guys with chips on their shoulders. Last year, you had a lot of different guys, myself included, that had one that wanted to prove people wrong. Pietrangelo leaving St. Louis and Stone leaving Ottawa. These guys wanted to, and Jack Eichel with the Buffalo situation. They're a pretty driven group. And I see a lot of that this year because they may feel they're not getting the respect that's due to them. And I think sometimes you get judged later on over time what type of team you are. Obviously, we live in the moment, but we'll see how we do. And that's one of the things we actually discussed as a team that, okay, are we going to be a one and done? There has been a few like that in the last 10, 12 years. Or do you want to be a team with longevity, the Blackhawks and most recently Tampa? So that's what's driving us. I feel like our guys, that's what they want. That's what their end goal is. And we'll see how it turns out.
But, you know,
you started the season winning 11 out of 12 games, I believe it was. I think you gave up 24 goals in that time. Then in the last 4 here, you've lost 3 out of 4. You've given up 15. You go from being this team that just locks it down in a certain way to a team that's, has given up much more than you'd like. How frustrating is that as a coach, and what tools do you reach into and grab when you're trying to fix that with the group now?
Well, the odd part is the last 6 or 7 games, we've been shut out twice. Our offensive numbers are better than they were our first 10 games. We're at the top of the league in chances and high danger chances, but that's what they are. They're stats, right? So they're not resulting in goals right now. Or at the start of the year, they were. I didn't think we were playing great at the start. I thought we did what we had to do to win. There was a little bit of taken off from the end of last year. That's what you have to do in the playoffs. You're never going to be perfect, but you have to find ways to win. And we were doing a lot of that. Now I think our game is a little more consistent, but we're not scoring. So as a result, we're chasing games. And then, when you do that, you're going to give up some chances you probably wouldn't otherwise. So it's going the other way as well. So I think right now we're just in one of those stretches. I'm not concerned about our group because we're generating chances. That we should come out of it fine. But again, we'll keep an eye on it. It just happens to be our time where we're going through a bit of the puck luck phase. And tomorrow will be a great test for us. We're in Dallas. It's a team that, should bring out the best in us. So hopefully that'll be something that, gets us going in the right direction.
Well, in the Stars, Bruce, the team that you beat to get to the Stanley Cup final out of the Western Conference final, the team that you beat in the second round was the Edmonton Oilers, where Ryan Rishaug, of course, makes his living in Edmonton. And I remember thinking when that series was over that you guys would win the Cup at that point, that Edmonton-Vegas matchup just felt like a moment in the playoffs. But, the coaching fraternity is pretty tight. And I know you got to be careful what you say here, but were you like a lot of other people when you see Jay Woodcroft fired a few months after a team that went toe-to-toe with you in the second round of the playoffs? I mean, what do you make when you see a fellow coach get fired like that?
Well, it is a fraternity, right? So it's tough when that happens. And Woody did a good job there getting them into the playoffs and seemed to find an identity for them that was working. And they lost to Colorado, who wins the Cup, and us that won the Cup. So it wasn't like, I know a lot of people when we were there last year felt like Edmonton was the favorite, and we didn't see it that way. And maybe that motivated us a little bit. But at the end of the day, they were a really good hockey club. And I felt like boy, that was a tough series. Probably looking back, our hardest series in terms of the emotion, the physicality, game planning for elite players, etc. So, but at the end of the day, that's the business sometimes. I've been through it. And in order to get back in, usually someone gets let go, right? So that's a little bit how we deal with it. Like, I got a job in Vegas because a good coach got let go, and I got a job in Boston because a good coach and Claude Julien got let go. So I think Jay will be back in the game. That'll be his timeline. So I can't comment on what was going on. We hadn't played Edmonton this year, so I didn't really see them firsthand. You're paying attention, but this time of the year, boy, you're worried about your own team more than anything. You're not dialed into the rest of the league other than what you hear, right? So in that regard, like I said, it's tough on them. I've said this before, it's tough on families, but those are the learning curves of coaching. And I've been through it, and Jay will be better off for it someday, hopefully. And off he goes, and good luck to, Knobloch gets an opportunity as a young guy. So it's his chance to take the ball and run with it. And that's kind of our business, right?
Yeah, the wheel definitely, it keeps on spinning. I wanted to dig in a little bit on a strategy you seem to implement with your goaltenders. So Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson alternating games 8 times this season. Allmark and Swayman, 39 starts each when you're back in Boston. Is it more about the goalies that you have and the personnel, or is there something about the goalie rotations that you think is just the right, smart way to go?
Well, before that, Tuukka was a number 1 in Boston. He played more. We kind of mapped out his starts. So I think it depends on the goaltender, first of all. Tuukka was an established guy. We were never going to play him 60-some games there. I just find the game is, for a goaltender, is more physical than it's ever been with all the traffic. It's harder, it's not just getting up and down, post to post. I mean, there's people banging India, you're out playing pucks, and there's a lot of traffic. So I think it's happened all over. But for us in Boston and now in Vegas, these are guys that have not been number ones. Like Swayman was never number one in the NHL, Hill or Thompson. And Ullmark in Buffalo a little bit, but he had some injuries, and so he never played that workload. So it was just more out of necessity of building the guy's game and see if he could get there. And we'll see with our guys. I don't know what they're going to do in Boston. Obviously, having lots of success. We don't want one guy sitting too long, but at some point the question becomes with Sean Burke, our goalie coach, do we need to groom a number one, right? And so we look at that as well. But we feel if we can use them both, and you have the success you'd like to and you're planning to, where you have a playoff run, the guy is fresh, because people say, well, why don't you rotate in the playoffs? And it's a good question, but if you've rotated most of the year and the guy's fresh going into the playoffs, then you can run with a hot hand who should be fresh to handle some of that. And I can't even tell you that last year, because we started with Brossoit and Hill went in later, so he didn't get the whole playoffs. So the part he did get, Hill, he was great, but he didn't have to play all 22 games for us. So I don't even have the answer to that yet, whether it can be fresh or not. But that's our plan this year. They're both going to play. It would be a max 60-40 split if we can help it. Probably even closer to 55-45%, barring injury or poor performance or something like that. But that's the plan, and hopefully we can stick to it.
I do got to follow up quick on that, because the idea that if you rotate them during the season, well, now you're in position where, they're used to it. But going away from a winning goalie in the playoffs feels like something no coach is ever going to do. This guy won the game, and I'm going to the next guy next game. Like, talk about against every instinct.
Yes, you got to have some conviction to do that, because you're going to hear about it if the next guy goes in and loses, right? And but I still think that it's going to happen. It is going to happen. Who's going to be the guy to do it? I don't know. Because it is a good plan when you think about it. And you can lose a game in the playoffs, and it's not the end of the world. I mean, people forget that. It's like,
right.
You don't win every game in the playoffs. It's, you go on to the next one, and the other guy goes back in who's had some time to sort of rest up a little. So, like I said, it's going to happen for sure. It's just who's going to end up doing it first. And then I wouldn't be surprised at all if it worked. I mean, why wouldn't it? It works in the regular season. Now, there's always the intangibles, right? Like, maybe you're playing a team that a guy's really good against and better suited for, right? And you got to think of those things as well, because in season you're seeing a lot of different teams, et cetera. It's much more determined schedule in the playoffs in terms of who you're playing and how they play, et cetera. So that has to factor in too. Now, if your goalies are both just good, solid goaltenders, then it shouldn't matter who they play. But there'll be a few other things to consider, but I can see it happening.
It's a sport where I feel like whenever someone's first at trying something new, it's a sport that's sometimes stuck in its ways. And, I've said this before, and I know people think I'm absolutely crazy, Bruce, but, you've never seen a team that I know of purposely put 3D on the ice and only 2 forwards when they're protecting.
You're crazy, Pierre.
I know. Pierre. No, but I mean, the rules say 5 skaters. I mean, I'm just saying it's amazing to me it's never happened. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
try
I think the 4 forwards in the 1D has happened all over the power plays, right? And
sure.
I mean, I used to do it in the last 5 minutes. If we're down a couple goals, I throw Davey Krejci out on defense, and I think there's a little bit of that more the other way than the 3D protecting a lead. But yes, I mean, it's trial and error. It's just, boy, it's a tough time to figure it out that it's the wrong thing to do in the playoffs, right? Like to learn a mistake there. So, but we used 2 goalies last year in the playoffs, and we won. And one got hurt, but the other guy was ready. So, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't take one guy just dominating. It was 2 guys. So, and it's been done in the past a little bit like that, where they've gone away from one guy. Maybe it goes from series to series too, right? Like, you might see something like that as well, more than it's just a true rotation. But using 2 goalies in the playoffs over the course of 2 months is definitely in the future hockey, I believe, especially the way teams are built now with their backup isn't just a guy that's thrown in the scheduled loss, so to speak, right? Every 2 weeks. It just doesn't work that way very often anymore.
Mm. Well, and on that note of evolution of the game and sports science, I mean, you guys have done an unbelievable job out of the gates here of fighting that cup hangover. What intel can you share of what you think you're trying to do in terms of rest versus reps and keeping the guys with as much energy as possible as you keep going here? Because that's obviously some of the things that teams that have won the cup have tried to figure out, that perfect recipe after winning a cup.
Yeah, and it was going to be new to me, but I did talk to other coaches in the league. John Stevens on our staff has won twice in LA. Martinez, Petrangelo. There's some guys in our room, right, we can go to. Two things happened for us. We came back and our testing, like our physical fitness testing, was as good as it's ever been. So right away, the guys took their summer seriously. And I had made the determination I was going to run the exact same camp as last year in terms of how it was structured. I was just going to be more efficient with our time and get people in and out of the building. And some of it is just teaching was a lot more necessary last year, right? I was new, different way of playing for the guys. So that's what we decided we'd do. We ran similar exhibition games, sort of amount of time the guys would play and just try to pick up where we left off last year. It was a bit, whether that's right or wrong. And it worked for us at the start. And we'll see if, does our malaise come a little later in the year, or will it come at all? Or are we going through it now? There's some of that stuff. But the other thing I truly believe in my time in the NHL is I don't believe you can afford to chase the standings early in the year. I think it just affects you mentally. Teams that are behind, and Edmonton is probably going to go through that, right? Like, it's tough, and it costs like we were talking about early, Jay's job, but it's hard when you're behind early on. So we wanted to make sure we got out of the gates well. That was a point of emphasis. Get going and get our standard up where it needs to be. So that was something we talked about. And then the other thing we talked about internally as a group is, okay, the Vegas Golden Knights, do you want to be a one and done Stanley Cup champion like a few teams have been over the last 12 to 15 years? Or do you want to be like the Chicago Blackhawks, right, where you're a legacy team, when they won their 3 and 5 years or whatever, and Tampa recently going to the Cup 3 years in a row. And I think we have the age group and the salary cap situation for us allow us to do that. And so that was a bit of our messaging, and that's a big picture thing. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's helped our guys get going here. Okay, let's not let it slip and enjoy what we did last year, but keep the standard high. So that's how we addressed our guys. That's what we talked about. And so far it's got us in the right direction.
What can you tell us about Braden McNabb this season? What do we need to know? I mean, plus 13 among the league leaders, way far ahead on your team. Everybody knows he's a good defenseman, but what's going on this season with him?
Well, him and Theo have been great for us. Shea Theodore, they've been a partnership for a while now. And don't forget, we played our full lineup for the first time last night or 2 nights ago in Pittsburgh. So we've had defensemen out, and they've been sort of the guys we've leaned on. Both Petro and Martinez, who are a pair, missed time. Haig just came back. White Cloud just came back. They've missed time. So they were carrying the load for us. And I think Theo would be up there too, but he's been on the ice for those empty net goals recently. So it's just been a strong pair. I can't say he's doing one thing exceptionally well. Ryan, he's just a steady guy that works hard to keep the puck out of the net. And Theo's a great transporter of the puck that gets it. So they have a great partnership on, how they share responsibility in the D zone. Braden's a sneaky good offensive player too. He's got good. If you look back at his numbers in junior, they were excellent, and he's got really good hockey sense and makes good plays. So he thinks the game real well. He's just a good, solid, probably one of the more underrated players I've ever been around. Now that I've been out west here for a little bit, because when you get out east, you don't see as many of these guys, right? That aren't big names. So just good, solid, all around player.
72 points with the Kootenay Ice in 10-11. So, yeah, pretty impressive numbers. Bruce, appreciate your time. Before we let you go, the name of the podcast is Got Your Back, because we love asking our guests for that time in their life where somebody stepped up for them and had their back. So as we present that to you, what story pops into Bruce Cassidy's head?
Well, there was a time when I grew up in Ottawa, and I went to a French school till I was in grade 6. My mother was born in Montreal, so me and my brother, I only have one brother. He's a year and a half older than me, and his name's Steven. It happens to be his birthday today, ironically, that you asked that. But I was on my way to school, and I was a younger kid. I had done 2 grades in the same year, so most of the kids in my class were older than me, and this kid was picking on me, probably in like grade 4. And I was a little nervous, right? And out of nowhere came my brother. I thought, okay, this is going to be my first fight on Coldry Avenue. And I don't know how I'm going to do because, this guy he just seemed scarier than me, as I recall. And my brother came out of nowhere and just flattened this guy and said, have you ever, go near him again? And I couldn't have been more appreciative at the time. It's because me and my brother were a year and a half old. And we had a lot of battles, right? So it's the last guy you think's going to come in there because, you're at that age. You're always, playing sports together, going at each other. So I was real appreciative of my brother in that situation as a young guy. And I never forgot it. It's probably been, it must have been almost 50 years ago. And I was glad he was there.
Wow. That's fantastic. I have brothers too, and I've got a younger brother. And if anybody's going to beat the hell out of my younger brother, it's bloody well going to be me and nobody
well, that's
else.
Probably
that's
what he
the
was
older
thinking.
brother mentality.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Also, a little key intel there. I didn't know that Bruce could speak a little French. I mean, that throws your hat in 10 years from now. Maybe if the Habs are looking for a head coach, you have to speak French in Montreal. So we'll have to keep that in mind. That's.
Oui, je parle français assez bien, but I forget a lot of it. But if I start speaking it with people, it'll come back to me. But it's been a few years. But yeah, I got a little bit in the toolbox there.
Yeah, damn, Bruce.
That's awesome. Merci beaucoup. Bruce, thank you so much for taking the time. Best of luck the rest of the way, and we'll check in again sometime.
All right. Thanks for having me on, fellas. Have a good day.
All right, that'll wrap up the podcast. Big thanks to the Vegas Golden Knights and to Bruce Cassidy for taking some time to chat with us. Big thanks to you for all of your downloads and subscriptions. Thanks to our title sponsor as well, Kuma Outdoor Gear. We'll chat with you again next week on Got Your Back NHL Edition. Cheers, everyone.